The night was quiet, too quiet as I pulled into the Shell station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. It was 4 a.m., and the world felt like it was holding its breath. I had just finished another long, boring shift at the urgent care facility, and all I wanted was to get home, eat my chicken sandwich and salad, and collapse into bed. But first, I needed gas. I parked at the pump, the sound of my car engine cutting through the silence, like a knife. The station was deserted as usual. Even during the day, this place felt like a ghost town. I grabbed my wallet and headed inside to pay with cash, saving a few dollars where I could. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up as I handed over the money, his eyes glued to a small TV playing some late-night infomercial. I didn't mind. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Back outside, I noticed another car had pulled up to the pump across from mine. A blue sedan, its headlights off, sat idling quietly. A man got out, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his presence like a shadow creeping up my spine. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself I was just tired, just paranoid from the long hours and lack of sleep. I grabbed the gas nozzle and started filling my tank. The rhythmic clicking of the pump, the only sound in the stillness. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man lock his gas nozzle in place and walk toward me. My heart skipped a beat. He stopped a few feet away, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked, his voice low and unnerving. I froze, my hand tightening around the gas nozzle. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in my car and drive away, but for some reason, I stayed. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the exhaustion clouding my judgment. Either way, I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's the trick?" He held up his hands, his fingers moving in a way that made my stomach churn. He pretended to pull his thumb off, the old stupid trick kids used to do on the playground. But there was nothing playful about the way he looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. He kept doing it, over and over, his gaze never leaving mine. I forced a laugh, hoping he'd take the hint and leave, but he didn't. He just kept staring, his smile growing wider, more unsettling. Finally, the gas pump clicked, signaling my tank was full. I yanked the nozzle out and hurried to put it back, my hands trembling. I didn't even bother to screw the gas cap back on. I just wanted to get out of there. I rushed inside to get my change, the clerk still oblivious to the world around him. When I came back out, the man was gone, but his car was still there, the gas nozzle still pumping fuel into his tank. I didn't wait around to see where he'd gone. I jumped into my car, locking the doors as soon as I was inside. My heart was pounding in my chest as I checked the back seat, half expecting to find him hiding there. But it was empty. I let out a shaky breath and started the engine, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the station. The blue sedan was still there, its headlights still off, as if it were waiting for something or someone. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of the man, his strange smile, his unsettling presence. I kept checking the mirror, half expecting to see his car following me, but the road behind me was empty. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, I was a nervous wreck. I grabbed my food and the spare key from its hiding spot, my hands still shaking as I unlocked the door and slipped inside. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes in the early hours of the morning. I tiptoed to the kitchen, trying not to wake my parents. I sat down at the table and unwrapped my sandwich, the smell of chicken and bread making my stomach growl. But before I could take a bite, I heard the front door open. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no answer. I set my sandwich down and crept to the foyer, my ears straining for any sound. The door was closed, but the spare key was gone. My stomach dropped. I ran upstairs, my footsteps loud in the silence, and burst into my parents' room. They were both in bed, startled awake by my sudden entrance. "Someone's in the house," I whispered, my voice trembling with fear. My dad was out of bed in an instant, grabbing the baseball bat he kept by the door. He hurried downstairs, my mom and I closed behind him. He turned on every light as we went, the house suddenly bright and exposed. When we got to the front door, my dad checked the hiding spot for the spare key. It was gone. My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You didn't check to see if anyone was watching you?" she scolded, her voice a mix of fear and anger. I didn't have the energy to argue. My dad started searching the house, room by room, his bat at the ready. My mom and I followed him, our hearts pounding with every step. When we got to my brother's old room, my dad left the lights on and moved on to the next room. I stayed behind, my eyes scanning the shadows. I checked under the bed, my hands trembling as I lifted the dust ruffle. Nothing. I opened the closet, my breath catching in my throat as I peered inside. Empty. I went back downstairs, my mom close behind me. My dad was in the basement, his voice echoing up the stairs as he called out, "Clear." I didn't want to go down there, not with the way my heart was racing. Instead, I went to the dining room, my eyes scanning the dark corners. I got down, on my hands and knees, my heart pounding as I looked under the table. And there he was. The man from the gas station was crouched under the table, his eyes wide and wild. I screamed, the sound tearing through the silence like a siren. My mom screamed too, her voice joining mine in a chorus of terror. My dad came running up the stairs, his bat raised, ready to fight. The man scrambled out from under the table, his movements quick and desperate. He lunged at my dad, the two of them grappling in the middle of the room. My mom and I didn't hesitate. We jumped into the fray, hitting and punching at the man with everything we had. He was strong, but we were desperate. Finally, with a grunt of effort, my dad managed to shove him toward the door. The man stumbled, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. Then with a final furious look, he turned and fled out the front door. We didn't waste any time. My mom called the police while my dad wedged a chair under the doorknob, his hands shaking as he worked. The police arrived quickly, their lights flashing in the driveway. They searched the area, but the man was gone. They left a patrol car parked in our driveway for the rest of the night, a small comfort in the face of our fear. The next day, my dad changed the locks on the front door, his hands steady now that the sun was up. My mom and I watched from the kitchen, our eyes heavy with exhaustion. I couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at me, the knowledge that I had brought this danger to our home. But as I sat there sipping a cup of coffee, I knew one thing for certain. I needed to get out of this town. The quiet, the boredom, the endless nights. It was all too much. And now, with the memory of that man's face burned into my mind, I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. The road called to me, the promise of escape just to drive away. I packed my bags that afternoon, my hands steady as I folded my clothes and zipped up my suitcase. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not after what had happened. not after the fear that still lingered in the corners of my mind. As I pulled out of the driveway that night, the darkness wrapping around me like a blanket, I felt a sense of relief. The road stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward,